There are times when we no longer recognize ourselves. Our emotions shift with every room we enter, every person we face. We adapt, we hide, we morph, sometimes to survive, sometimes just to be accepted. But how much of that is truly us? Deep in the natural world, a creature exists that lives this very paradox, the deer chameleon. And through its story, we may begin to understand the emotional instability within ourselves. Emotional instability is a silent storm that many carry inside. It's the unexplainable mood swings, the internal turbulence that can make someone laugh uncontrollably one moment and fall into quiet despair the next. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a complex emotional landscape that can confuse even the person experiencing it. Emotional instability isn't always visible from the outside, but inside, it feels like walking a tightrope with the wind constantly shifting directions. At its core, emotional instability is the struggle to maintain a consistent emotional baseline. Some days feel like a roller coaster of feelings, joy, fear, anger, sadness, all rising and falling without clear reason. This isn't simply being moody or dramatic, it's often rooted in deep emotional wounds, past traumas, and unresolved patterns that formed during early development. Those who experience it often feel like they're constantly adjusting to other people's expectations, sacrificing their emotional needs to maintain harmony or avoid rejection. In everyday life, emotional instability can manifest in countless ways. One moment, a person might feel confident and connected, the next, they feel abandoned or attacked, sometimes over something minor. Relationships become challenging because reactions can be unpredictable. A loved one's harmless comment may trigger defensiveness or withdrawal. A moment of silence from a friend might feel like personal rejection. These responses are not intentional, they're emotional reflexes shaped by years of emotional hypervigilance. People living with emotional instability often develop a powerful sensitivity to their surroundings. They can read a room better than most, picking up on subtle energy shifts, facial expressions, or tone changes. This heightened perception can be a strength, but it also becomes exhausting. Constantly scanning for emotional threats means the body and mind rarely rest. Over time, this leads to burnout, anxiety, and even depression. One of the most misunderstood aspects of emotional instability is how deeply it affects identity. Many struggle to answer simple questions like, "What do I want?" or "Who am I without others' influence?" Because they have spent so long mirroring those around them. Adapting their mood, opinions, or behavior, they lose touch with their authentic self. They become emotional chameleons, blending in to avoid conflict, to feel safe, to be loved. This often starts in childhood. In homes where emotions were unpredictable or invalidated, children learn to survive by being watchful and adaptable. They become experts at pleasing others, reading emotional cues, and changing themselves to fit the moment. As adults, they carry these survival skills into relationships, workplaces, and social environments. But what once protected them now isolates them. They want connection, but fear it. They crave stability, but doubt they deserve it. Emotional instability also creates a deep sense of shame. Many blame themselves for not being stronger or more balanced. They may hear comments like, "You're too sensitive" or "You're overreacting," which reinforces the belief that something is wrong with them. Over time, they stop trusting their emotions altogether. This disconnection from self is one of the most painful consequences of emotional instability. It's not just about struggling with feelings, but about losing faith in their own inner compass. Yet, within all this turbulence, there is a hidden strength, adaptability. Those who live with emotional instability are often incredibly intuitive, creative, and emotionally intelligent. They've developed unique ways of understanding others because they've spent a lifetime managing emotional terrain. The key is not to suppress or reject their sensitivity, but to ground it, to build emotional regulation and self-trust so that their emotions become allies rather than enemies. This journey starts with awareness. Recognizing emotional instability not as a flaw, but as a sign that something inside needs attention, care, and healing. When a person begins to identify the patterns, to understand their triggers, and to separate their feelings from their identity, a transformation begins. They no longer become victims of every emotional wave but learn how to ride those waves with resilience. It's not easy. But it's possible. And the first step is realizing, you're not alone. What you feel is real, and it matters. You are not broken, you are responding to a world that once taught you to survive at all costs. Now, it's time to learn how to live. But what if the answers to understanding emotional instability weren't only inside us, but also out there in the wild? What if nature had already written this story in the form of a small, almost invisible creature that shifts colors and behavior to survive? Hidden in the dense, humid underbrush of tropical forests, the deer chameleon is a master of invisibility. A rare and elusive creature, it remains largely unknown to the world, not because it is small or fragile, but because it is extraordinarily good at becoming what it needs to be in order to survive. With the gentle eyes of a deer and the adaptive skin of a chameleon, this animal doesn't just change color. It changes posture, energy, and even the speed of its breath to match the mood of its environment. The deer chameleon isn't a real species you'll find in textbooks, it's a symbolic hybrid, born from the most instinctive parts of two real animals. From the deer, it inherits hypersensitivity, skittishness, and the deep-rooted urge to flee at the first sign of danger. From the chameleon, it gains the ability to alter its physical appearance based on external stimuli. Temperature, light, emotional vibrations, and even perceived threats. Together, this creature becomes the perfect metaphor for emotional instability in the human world. Imagine this animal in its natural habitat. When the forest is calm and safe, its colors soften, warm earth tones ripple across its skin as it moves slowly, deliberately, blending into the tranquil moss and bark. But if a sudden noise erupts or a predator's shadow crosses its path, the deer chameleon's entire being transforms. Its colors sharpen, its breath quickens, its posture tenses. It may freeze, vanish into the foliage, or dart into cover with barely a sound. Its life depends on being able to read and react to its environment instantly. There is no room for error. Unlike other creatures that rely on brute strength or aggressive displays to survive, the deer chameleon survives through emotional mimicry. It senses the energy of other animals, predators and allies alike, and adjusts accordingly. If a dominant creature approaches with aggression, the deer chameleon might shrink, dim its colors, and slow its movements to appear non-threatening. But if that same creature is passive, the chameleon may allow more of its natural color to show, cautiously exploring its surroundings again. This behavioral adaptability is not a game, it's instinctual. The deer chameleon doesn't choose to change, it transforms in response to subtle, often invisible emotional cues in its environment. It doesn't know how to be constant. Its very survival depends on its ability to not be one fixed thing for too long. To stay still is to risk exposure. To be seen is to be vulnerable. Interestingly, the deer chameleon's transformations go beyond physical camouflage. Researchers who've observed animals with similar behavioral traits, such as the cuttlefish or certain skittish forest mammals, note how stress responses can alter not only their coloration but also the chemicals they emit, the direction of their movement, and the way they breathe. Some even release pheromones that influence the mood of nearby creatures, creating a ripple effect of fear, caution, or calm. The deer chameleon, in our metaphor, carries this same instinctual radar. It senses emotional climates the way others sense temperature. Its social behavior is just as complex. The deer chameleon doesn't form strong packs or herds. It prefers to move alone or in small, shifting groups where social roles aren't clearly defined. Prolonged exposure to any one animal or energy can make it feel uneasy. Attachment, though desired, feels dangerous. Being emotionally entangled with others means losing the ability to shift freely. And for a creature whose life is built on constant adaptation, stillness is terrifying. In mating rituals, the deer chameleon's behavior is paradoxical. It yearns for connection, often emitting gentle signals of openness, but the moment it senses rejection or unpredictability, it retreats. It may try again later, cautiously, but each approach is layered with hesitation. This mirrors the push-pull dynamic found in emotionally unstable relationships, where the desire to bond is always at odds with the instinct to protect. Even when not threatened, the deer chameleon cannot fully relax. Its nervous system is always on, scanning, reacting, preparing. It's not paranoid, it's evolved. And though its way of being may look tragic to some, it is also beautiful. The animal is deeply attuned to life's subtleties, a change in wind, a shift in tone, the quiet between sounds. In a way, the deer chameleon lives more consciously than most. Its struggle, however, lies in this same awareness. Constantly reacting, never anchoring, it becomes both everywhere and nowhere, seen, yet never fully known. It is a symbol not of weakness, but of emotional intelligence without grounding. Its life teaches us that survival without stability leads to invisibility. It exists, but only in fragments, in moments, in flickers of color before it blends into the background once again. This creature, in all its sensitivity and brilliance, mirrors the emotionally unstable human, those of us who, too, change with the emotional temperature of a room, who blend into environments to stay safe, and who long to be fully seen but fear what might happen if we are. And yet, by understanding the deer chameleon's instinctual patterns, we may uncover powerful truths about our own. Why do we adapt? Why do we hide? And most importantly, what happens when we forget what our original color ever was? It begins subtly. A shift in someone's tone of voice. A glance that lingers a second too long. A silence that feels heavier than it should. The emotionally unstable human, like the deer chameleon, doesn't just notice these changes, they absorb them. Just like the chameleon scans its environment for cues to determine safety or threat, the emotionally reactive person constantly reads emotional temperatures, adjusting their behavior before anyone even realizes a shift has occurred. This isn't a performance. It's survival. Imagine someone walking into a room where tension hums beneath the surface. Most people might feel slightly uncomfortable but push through. The deer chameleon human, however, changes instantly. Their voice becomes softer or louder, their posture more rigid or loose, their smile tighter or more exaggerated. Like the animal, they don't wait to be told what's wrong, they feel it, and they respond. They begin to reflect the room instead of standing within it. This is the camouflage of emotion. Not in the sense of lying or manipulating, but in the deep-seated belief that showing your true emotional state is unsafe. Instead of saying, "I'm nervous," this person becomes whatever will make others comfortable. If you're angry, they become agreeable. If you're sad, they offer lightness. If you're joyful, they amplify it, even if they feel hollow inside. They morph because their nervous system tells them to. They shift because they believe that not shifting will bring chaos. Like the deer chameleon, the emotionally unstable person often does not understand who they are outside of context. Alone, they may feel restless, undefined. In company, they reflect. Their personality is like water, taking the shape of the emotional container they're placed in. This is not deception, it's a lack of inner stillness. The fear of being fixed in one identity is overwhelming, because that identity might not be accepted. So they choose the safer route, becoming what the room needs. But the price of this constant adaptation is high. The deer chameleon may avoid predators by blending in, but it also loses the ability to attract a mate, to form deep bonds, or to mark territory. In humans, the cost is equally painful: shallow relationships, emotional burnout, chronic self-doubt. Friends might say, "You're so easygoing," without realizing that easygoing is often a disguise for, "I don't feel safe showing you who I really am." This connection becomes especially evident in close relationships. The emotionally unstable person, like the chameleon, deeply desires intimacy. But as soon as they begin to feel emotionally exposed, their instincts scream danger. They retreat. They shift. They become distant, irritable, or hyper-aware. Conflict becomes unbearable. Not because of what's said, but because it threatens their fragile emotional equilibrium. They either mirror their partner's energy or withdraw entirely, unable to hold their ground without losing themselves. Here's the most heartbreaking part: these people often don't know they're doing it. Just like the deer chameleon doesn't reflect before changing color, the emotionally reactive person doesn't consciously decide to adapt. It's embedded in their emotional wiring. It's reflexive. And when others accuse them of being fake, too sensitive, or manipulative, they retreat further, shamed for behaviors that are rooted in protection, not malice. Even in professional settings, this adaptation can be seen. The emotionally unstable individual may excel in environments where reading people is rewarded: sales, acting, service roles. But long-term, this constant mirroring becomes exhausting. Their identity fragments. They may feel like imposters, never sure whether their success was earned by skill or by performance. The line between authenticity and adaptation blurs until nothing feels truly theirs. Yet, just like the deer chameleon, this person is incredibly perceptive. They notice mood shifts others ignore. They understand nuance. They feel deeply. These are not flaws, they are sensitivities honed over years of emotional exposure. When harnessed with awareness, they can lead to extraordinary empathy and intuition. But without grounding, these same gifts become a prison. The key lies not in suppressing the instinct to adapt, but in learning when it's safe not to. The deer chameleon cannot stop its camouflage, but if placed in a sanctuary, free of predators, surrounded by trust, it may eventually let its true colors rest on its skin a little longer. So too can the emotionally unstable human begin to peel back the layers, revealing not just who they reflect, but who they are. This parallel between animal and human behavior is not just poetic, it's functional. We see ourselves in nature because we are nature. And when we look at the deer chameleon, hiding and shifting and surviving, we recognize the same patterns in ourselves. But the question is, how long can one survive by becoming invisible before they begin to disappear entirely? Science has long tried to explain why some people seem to shift their behavior like a chameleon in response to emotional environments. What used to be dismissed as oversensitivity is now understood through the lens of neuroscience, attachment theory, and trauma-informed psychology. The truth is, the emotionally unstable person, like the deer chameleon, isn't weak or irrational. They are responding to invisible patterns written deep within their nervous system. Let's begin with the brain. The human brain has a small, almond-shaped region called the amygdala, our emotional alarm system. It scans for threats, real or imagined. In emotionally sensitive individuals, this part of the brain is hyperactive. Imagine living with a smoke detector that goes off at the first hint of heat, not just fire. That's what it feels like when your brain is constantly scanning emotional environments, triggering defensive behaviors even when there's no real danger. This hypervigilance is often rooted in early experiences. According to attachment theory, the way we connect, or fail to connect, with caregivers during childhood shapes how we respond emotionally as adults. When children grow up in unpredictable emotional climates, where anger, love, or silence could strike without warning, they learn to adapt. Their nervous system becomes attuned not to safety, but to survival. They become emotional shapeshifters because consistency was never an option. Psychologist Dr. Mary Ainsworth described this as anxious attachment, a pattern where individuals crave closeness but fear rejection. They're constantly tuning into others' moods, trying to manage or avoid conflict before it begins. Just like the deer chameleon changes color in response to threats, the anxiously attached person changes behavior in response to perceived emotional threats. It's not a choice, it's a conditioned response to chaos. Neuroscience adds another layer. Studies on mirror neurons, the brain cells that help us empathize, show that highly sensitive people may have more active mirror neuron systems. This means they don't just notice other people's emotions, they feel them. They absorb them. If someone near them is angry, they feel the anger as if it were their own. This blurring of boundaries is both a gift and a curse. It creates empathy but can also lead to emotional overload and identity confusion. From a biological perspective, animals that rely on camouflage for survival often live in high-threat environments. The deer chameleon is no different. It must adapt its appearance not for beauty, but for protection. The same applies to humans who shift emotionally to fit in. When rejection feels dangerous, when love feels conditional, emotional camouflage becomes a tool for staying safe. It's the nervous system saying, blend in, or be harmed. But what about the cost? Constant emotional adaptation has measurable effects. Chronic stress from emotional instability leads to elevated cortisol levels, which can affect sleep, digestion, and immune function. Over time, this can result in anxiety, depression, or even autoimmune disorders. The body keeps score, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk famously wrote. When the emotional world is unstable, the physical body often suffers the consequences. Still, there is hope. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that even deeply ingrained patterns can change. Therapy modalities like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems work to untangle these emotional survival mechanisms. These approaches don't just treat symptoms, they teach the brain and body that safety can exist without shape-shifting. Importantly, self-awareness is the first step. When emotionally unstable individuals begin to understand that their behaviors are instinctive rather than defective, healing begins. Just as the deer chameleon may gradually shed its camouflage when it feels safe in its habitat, the emotionally reactive person can slowly reveal their authentic self in nurturing environments. The science doesn't pathologize this behavior, it explains it. Emotional instability, in many cases, is not a disorder to be shamed but a survival strategy to be understood. When we see a person constantly adapting, we must ask, what made them believe they couldn't be themselves? That question, more than any diagnosis, opens the door to compassion. In the end, understanding the science behind emotional camouflage reminds us that we are not broken for adapting. We are wired to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And the more we understand the biology behind our behavior, the closer we come to rewriting the script, from reactive to resilient, from hidden to whole. Meet Elena. She's the kind of person who always knows the mood of the room before she walks fully into it. At work, she's upbeat and cheerful around her boss, who values optimism. Around her quieter colleagues, she speaks softly and cautiously, fearing she might overstep. At home, when her partner is irritable, she becomes excessively accommodating, offering tea, changing dinner plans, and apologizing for things she didn't do. By the end of the day, she's exhausted, not from what she's done, but from being too many people for too many moods. Elena's story is not rare. It's a human version of the deer chameleon's camouflage. Like the animal that changes its skin to merge with its environment, Elena molds her behavior to match emotional climates. And just like the chameleon, it's not a choice, it's survival. She learned early on that people's moods were unpredictable, and the safest way to live was to always blend in. Then there's Jonah. As a child, his father's anger was volcanic and unpredictable. Sometimes it came after silence. Sometimes it came after a simple question. Jonah learned to scan faces, tones, and even footsteps to detect the early signs of eruption. Now an adult, Jonah still carries this hyper-awareness. He often says, "I just have a gut feeling when something's wrong," but the truth is more complex. His nervous system is constantly decoding emotional signals before his mind can even form the thought. He avoids confrontation, not because he lacks confidence, but because conflict still feels like danger. In relationships, emotional camouflage can look like people-pleasing. Take Layla, for example. In every romantic relationship she enters, she mirrors her partner's interests. If they love hiking, she buys boots. If they love jazz, she becomes an overnight expert. It's not manipulation. It's her way of securing belonging. She says yes when she wants to say no. She suppresses discomfort to avoid being abandoned. Layla's sense of self is fluid because her identity has always depended on being whoever others needed her to be. In parenting, we see this in children too. 6-year-old Marcus becomes the funny one in class not because he loves jokes, but because he knows laughter makes adults less angry. His teacher once said, "He's a natural performer, but at home, Marcus is quiet, reserved, careful. He's learned that if he can manage other people's emotions, maybe he won't be punished." Children like Marcus adapt early, becoming little emotional managers in environments where safety is conditional. Even in friendships, camouflage appears. Consider Priya, who never shares her own struggles. When friends talk about their problems, she listens attentively, gives advice, and offers help. But when she's hurting, she hides it behind a smile. "Everyone's going through something worse," she says. Deep down, she fears that showing pain would make her a burden. She's internalized the idea that emotions are to be managed, not expressed. All these stories share one thread: emotional instability shaped by the need to survive in unpredictable emotional environments. These are not weak individuals, they are intuitive, emotionally intelligent, and incredibly resilient. But the cost of this survival strategy is high: identity loss, burnout, anxiety, and chronic self-doubt. Some even mistake this behavior for manipulation. But that interpretation misses the mark. The person who changes depending on who they're with isn't trying to deceive, they're trying to connect, stay safe, and avoid harm. Like the deer chameleon, their shifts are not deceptions, they're adaptations. And sometimes, this behavior becomes so ingrained that the person doesn't notice they're doing it. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They agree to plans they dread. They become masters of emotional code switching, not realizing they've never been in a room as their full self. The tragedy is not that they're changing, it's that they've never been taught that they don't have to. But glimpses of authenticity break through. One day, Elena says no to a favor she can't take on. Jonah voices discomfort instead of shutting down. Layla shares a fear without editing it for acceptability. These moments are small, but seismic. They signal the beginning of unlearning, the slow shedding of emotional armor. Each story here is a window into a common experience that is rarely named but deeply felt. Emotional camouflage is not always visible to others, but it is deeply known to those who live it. Behind the smiles, the adaptability, and the silence are nervous systems still reacting to danger that no longer exists. And yet, with awareness, the cycle can be interrupted. Like a deer chameleon that finds a safe patch of forest where it no longer needs to shift, humans too can find spaces, relationships, therapies, inner work, where they can remain one color, one truth, one self. What if you could stop changing colors? What if, instead of blending into every emotional atmosphere, you could simply be, unfiltered, unguarded, enough? That is the central question behind the journey of emotional camouflage. Like the deer chameleon, many of us have become experts at adaptation, but few of us have learned the art of stillness, of staying true, even when the environment tries to mold us. The first lesson is simple but powerful: awareness is the first act of self-liberation. Recognizing when you're shifting for safety rather than sincerity is not a sign of weakness, it's a breakthrough. That moment you catch yourself saying yes when you meant no, or laughing when you want to cry, is a moment of awakening. It's the beginning of reclaiming agency over your emotions. When we begin to understand that emotional adaptability is a form of survival, not manipulation, we shift the narrative from shame to compassion. You're not too sensitive, fake, or confused. You're responding the best way you learned how in an environment that didn't always honor your emotional truth. And now, as an adult, you have the opportunity to rewrite that pattern, not all at once, but gently, choice by choice. One powerful reflection is this: authenticity is not about being the same person everywhere. It's about being the truest version of yourself in each context, still evolving, still growing, but not hiding. Just like the deer chameleon must sometimes shift for survival, there are moments in life where adaptation is necessary. But when it becomes constant, when every environment demands a new mask, we begin to lose the thread of who we are. Reclaiming your emotional identity begins with small acts of courage. Say what you feel without editing for approval. Pause before you adapt. Check in with your body. Does it tense up when you agree to something? Does it relax when you speak your truth? The body remembers what the mind has forgotten, who you are beneath the camouflage. Therapy, support groups, journaling, and honest conversations can all be part of this healing. But above all, it takes self-compassion. You're not broken, you're brilliant. The same sensitivity that made you read rooms with precision is the same gift that can help you connect deeply, lead with empathy, and love fiercely. But to wield that gift fully, you must first offer it to yourself. Another lesson is the importance of choosing your emotional environments wisely. Just as the deer chameleon thrives best in habitats where it doesn't constantly need to shift, we too flourish in relationships and communities that value our consistency over our performance. If you're always adjusting in a space, it might not be the space that deserves you. Safety is not found in people who tolerate your masks, it's found in those who welcome your unfiltered self. Let's be clear. Shedding emotional camouflage doesn't mean being raw at all times. It doesn't mean oversharing or rejecting social grace. It means moving from reaction to intention. From survival to authenticity. From pleasing to presence. It means giving yourself permission to be complex, messy, growing, and still worthy of love. And finally, it means extending this understanding to others. The next time someone seems emotionally inconsistent, instead of labeling them as unstable, consider that they might be surviving. Instead of judgment, offer space. Instead of impatience, offer grace. When we understand the instinct behind the camouflage, we replace criticism with compassion. This journey isn't linear. There will be days when you slip into old patterns, when the urge to adapt feels overwhelming. That's okay. Healing is not about perfection, it's about presence. Every time you choose to stay in your truth, even briefly, you're rewiring something powerful within you. The deer chameleon doesn't change out of vanity, it changes out of necessity. But when the storm passes, when the threat is gone, it finds stillness again. So can you. You can learn to stay. To feel. To belong without disappearing.